Talking Trojans here at the Voice of College Football. Please like, share the videos out on social media, and subscribe. We got Ryan Abraham on the line from USCFootball.com on the 247 Sports platform. Ryan, it's been a while. How you doing?
I'm doing all right, Mark. Yeah, it's been a while. Hopefully all is well. It's been a weird year with, kind of limited sports, and now it seems we're ramping up again, so it feels pretty good.
It does feel good. Things are getting back to normal, and more as I talk to guys like you that make it out to practice, the conditions are loosening up somewhat. So the Trojans hit the field on March 29th. As you mentioned to me before we started to record, they've popped the pads a couple times in full contact practices. Anything in addition to just the typical workouts that come to mind as storylines at the outset here?
So they did bring in a new strength and conditioning coach. He was assistant at Notre Dame, Robert Steiner. And so the beginnings of practice, it looked pretty similar, but that sort of sets the tone a lot of the times, Mark, of that warm-up period. And that's where they allow us to film. We're kind of perched above in the aquatic center, kind of overlooking the field. So it's a different viewpoint than when we were allowed on the field. Still no media interviews afterwards. We get Zoom calls and stuff, but we can watch practice a couple days a week. Two out of the three practices we could watch. And they did the last couple of practices, like you mentioned, go full pads, which is something they hadn't really done as much in the past. They would start off with a version of the Oklahoma drill they called the Trojan drill, where you have like two linemen going at it, like a linebacker and a running back, or a tight end or something going at it, and then a running back trying to run through the mess and stay within and score. And it's a really physical way to kind of pop off practice. Pads are popping, guys are tackling, everyone's getting excited. And I feel like that's something they're trying to change the culture a little bit. They were, a lot of times they were known as sort of softer practices and stuff under Clay Helton. I think Todd Orlando, the new defensive coordinator, really wants to bring that sense of toughness. So it seems like it's a little bit of a shift. It's spring. Obviously, the game's months and months away, but that's what USC fans, I think, would like to see, something a little bit more physicality, a little more toughness out of this team.
Defensive back Max Williams was a candidate for that nickel spot. 22 tackles last year, 2.5 tackles for loss. His loss via a knee ligament tear. How does that change personnel and depth chart?
Yes, it's a little unfortunate for him. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but just always played with a ton of heart. And it's funny, like they didn't recruit those kind of guys as much. He was a local kid, Sarah High School. Had the same kind of knee issues in high school, and they brought him in. And like you mentioned, he's just been a baller for USC. He's just got out there and made plays and just proved that he belonged. It was unfortunate watched him at practice yesterday, kind of getting carted off the field. And you're hoping it wasn't something that serious, but certainly was. I think overall the secondary depth is pretty good, but right now they're a little short on corners. The nickelback spot isn't quite as deep as you'd like. They had some guys missing from the secondary because of COVID protocols. There's other guys that are, out with injuries. So I feel like in the fall they're going to be okay. But another limitation I think they're going to have, in the spring. But it's definitely an unfortunate, injury for Max Williams. His dad actually tweeted it out and kind of broke the news himself. So you wish him a speedy recovery. But kind of, it's football. Things like that happen.
You can get a free USC mask at voiceofcollegefootball.com. Just go there, register for free. You get a free mask, 20% off your first purchase as well. We've got about 35 teams available, including the Trojans. We got Ryan Abraham on the line from 247 Sports, USCFootball.com. So it's great to have Ryan here. 5 early enrollees, 2 at the top of the board in regard to the 247 Sports rankings are quarterbacks, Jackson Dart, Miller Moss, so much talked about there, and Jackson Dart's ascension through the high school ranks very quickly at the end of his recruiting cycle. Your thoughts about early enrollees and who could possibly make an impact in 2021?
Yeah, so they actually have, it's funny, they have 14 new faces in there. You got the 5 transfers too. So there's definitely some new blood, and it's a lot deeper of a group than what I've seen probably in years past in the spring. Sometimes, especially with the NCAA allowing everyone to stay. They had 7 defections to the NFL, but you got a bunch of seniors that were going to be gone, and they're sticking around. And, so it kind of fills out the numbers a little bit. But some of the new faces, you mentioned the 2 quarterbacks, everyone's kind of watching them. Keaton Slovis is the clear starter. And it's kind of gone back and forth each day. I think Miller Moss had a better day on Tuesday when I saw reports that we had talked to people on Saturday. We saw, I think Jackson Dart probably played a little better. So it's gone back and forth a little bit. They're both sort of getting their sea legs, figuring out this whole college thing and what they have to do. And they're also playing most likely behind Mo Hassan, who's a transfer from Vanderbilt. So there's 4 kind of quarterbacks getting the majority of the reps. So those guys are interesting. One guy I would say watch for is Katie Nixon. He's a senior transfer from the University of Colorado, wearing number 21, different body type than Tyler Vaughn, who was wearing it last year, but electric guy. He makes a lot of plays, shifty dude. I think he brings a little something different to the receiver room than what we've seen in the past. So he's one of those newcomers that's going to be like, oh, you can come on the scene and make some plays. You're going to like Corey Foreman's the top guy coming in the class. He's not there early, like you had mentioned, but he's going to be the one that'll probably be the biggest impact. But right now, it's just kind of fun checking out these new guys and some of the new positions and see where everyone's landing.
We touched on the new quarterbacks. Getting back to the guy, Keaton Slovis, the numbers were fine. Of course, they won their first 5 games of last year until they got to the Pac-12 championship game. But there was a lot of talk, and it was pretty obvious in watching him play. It just didn't seem like the ball was coming out of his hand right. Just didn't seem like he had the kind of velocity that he had the year before. Was there ever really anything substantiated there? And I know that you mentioned before we started to record that being a point of emphasis in cleaning up some of his mechanics.
Yeah, so it's funny. We talked to last year, like Keaton Slovis, we talked to Graham Harrell, we talked to Clay Helton. We all got different answers of what, one day it was the ball was wet, or then it was windy. And we talked to people, it was like the Arizona game. It was like, well, it wasn't windy there. And it just became this thing. And I'm not sure I don't know if they knew. They definitely didn't have their story straight. And I think for Keaton Slovis, a lot of it was he felt there was some arm fatigue there. He felt that he wasn't quite mechanically where he needed to be. And I think some of it comes from there's a little bit of a stunting going on where you didn't have spring practice. You were coming off an injury. He got injured in the very last play of the season for him in the bowl game and against Iowa. So he gets injured. There's kind of rehabbing back. He never got a chance to really sort of get his feet under him. And then you're pretty much thrown into the season, and it just wasn't quite there. Now he has this offseason to get ready again, but he worked with some of the different quarterback gurus out there. Tom House is a former major league pitcher. He works with Tom Brady. He's worked with Drew Brees. He's working with Keaton Slovis now and his group. And I actually got to talk to him this past week, and it's interesting, what they do as far as working on mechanics. Keaton Slovis said a lot of it was coming from his lower body, kind of making things more stable. And once you kind of get that stability going with your lower body, things were working with his arm. His arm's fine. He said he's throwing the ball. He doesn't feel like he's fatigued anymore. Just a few little mechanical things have helped out. So we haven't seen the ball really like flutter like we saw at times. Sometimes he threw it well in 2020, and sometimes it wasn't that great, wasn't that sharp. It's been sharper from what we've seen so far. So I think that, it could be one of those things where you have a little dip in the sophomore slump, and that, expectations are he gets back to that freshman year form, because he was really special coming in as a true freshman. Where, the other thing too, Mark, he didn't know he's going to be the starter. No one else knew he was going to be the starter. There weren't the expectations there were when you're like on Heisman list going into the sophomore year too. So I think there was a lot of different factors there. And I feel like my gut is he's going to get back to his old form in 2021.
30 TDs, 9 picks that first year. And really, off the top of my head, really the only game that he may have had a subpar performance was that game on the road at BYU.
Yeah.
USC at 5-1 last year, lost the Pac-12 championship game. We got Ryan Abraham on the line from USCFootball.com. The brand 247 Sports. So please get on over there and check out USC football coverage. The defense, Ryan, this USC unit year to year, I'd say in the last 10 years, post Pete Carroll on defense, has been a defense that I always loved watching based on individual performances. Like, there were always stars in the secondary, great players in spots, but when it all came together, didn't typically perform at the level that you would expect based on the talent on that side of the ball. You mentioned Todd Orlando. Do you think they finally have the personnel and the scheme in place to make it happen?
Yeah, I think it's a good observation, Mark. We've seen that a lot. There would be the talent level would be here, but the performance might be a little bit lower than that. And I like what Todd Orlando has been saying. And one of the stuff, we got to talk to him last week, I believe it was. And for him, he wanted to install a kind of a new culture of more of toughness, of discipline. And they didn't really have an opportunity to do that last spring because they only had one spring practice and everything got cut short because of the pandemic. And he was telling us, it's like, we had 4 weeks to get ready in the fall. That's all the time they had. It's hard to kind of install the culture you want when you're really preparing for games that are just a few weeks away. So he was really excited to come out here in the spring. I love the way he talks about if it's a practice that doesn't have pads on, it doesn't really matter. One of the coaches told us it's like PE class. It doesn't, it's really not the same. But once full pads come on, then, that's when guys can shine. You can show, you can separate the men from the boys, I guess you could say. So I think he's saying all the right things. Schematically, I think they're a pretty aggressive defense. He's really taken the linebackers under his wing, and they underperformed, I think, early on in the season, the short season. But they got that's a group that got better. And I feel like now that they have this opportunity to really install the culture they want, and then also kind of the schemes, you're going to see a more cohesive defensive unit and utilize some of that talent better than they might in the past. So I'm pretty bullish on what he's had to say, and just watching them and watching them practice, it does feel different than what we've seen the past several years from USC.
Ryan, I can't let you go without asking about Clay Helton. You hear it 50,000 times more than I do, and I hear it plenty, like every other day, about actually USC fans going to the extent of wanting to tank a season to get him out the door, many of them. And the last couple of years, it seems to be that he's turning in the type seasons, at least the last 2 years, at 8-5 and 5-1, that were just good enough that a lot of people were dissatisfied, thinking, I wish we would have just tanked it this year to get him out the door. When you really look at the scope of what he's accomplished there, I don't think people give him enough credit. I just did a Pac-12 coaches rankings. He's 36-12 in the conference. He's won the conference. He's won a Rose Bowl. He had that awful recruiting class a couple of years ago, but the latest one is top 10 in the nation. Just your assessment of Clay Helton, and what is realistic about the assessment of him within the campus in terms of what he needs to do to keep going?
Yeah, you're right. It's I get that 50,000 times a day. I mean, I can't tell you how many USC fans ask what's going to take, not to keep him, but it's mostly what's it going to take to get him fired. They've lost faith. That 5-7 season from a few years ago, when they had the most talented team in the Pac-12 and went 5-7, just people that didn't sit right for people. But I would say when Mike Bohn came in, the new athletic director, he was an experienced guy. I think they felt like we need to upgrade everything. So they had to upgrade the support staff. They had to upgrade everything around Clay Helton. Some of that's on the previous administration, but some of it's on Clay Helton too. You're the head coach at USC. If you need more staff, if you want to hire better assistant coaches, you should be able to demand that stuff and get it done. They're now hiring, I think, better assistants under him. They've definitely built out the support staff. He has the resources around him now to make another run and try win the Pac-12 again. I think that's what you got to do, Mark. For me, if he doesn't win the Pac-12 in 2021, it would just, to me, would be another disappointing season. I mean, they lost to an Oregon team that finished second in the North, lost to Cal, lost to Oregon State, and then beat USC at the Coliseum. To me, that was a failure of a season. Not being, I know undefeated is not, that shouldn't be the expectation or the bar that you're setting. But the way the season played out, they lost all their hard games, and they got to play the second place team from the North, and they should have won that game. So to me, that was a failure. In 2021, to make sure he keeps his job, I do think he has to win the Pac-12. He got an extension a few years ago. Now that's starting to run out. There's less of a buyout that the administration would have to pay out. So I feel this is the year, Mark. I've probably been saying this the last 3 years, but maybe it's this one. This is the one that go out and play to the level of expectations. You're the best team in the Pac-12. Go win the Pac-12. Anything short of that, I think, would be another disappointment. And if they win the South and lose to Oregon or Washington something in the Pac-12 championship game, they could make a change. So I know that's still, you go 8-4 or 9-3. Without winning the Pac-12, I'm not sure his job is safe. So that's not source or anything. It's just my personal opinion. But I've been wrong the last few years, so we'll see, Mark.
The division's interesting. Herm Edwards down at Arizona State. Of course, Kyle Whittingham's rock solid. He's always going to do the same thing and run the same program and same identity at Utah. Colorado surprised some people last year, but USC, as you mentioned, best talent in the division, and Oregon obviously has recruited well the last few years, so it's close between those two. for the overall talent lead. Ryan Abraham, 247 Sports, USCFootball.com. The coverage over there is phenomenal. Check it out, of course, and get a free mask at voiceofcollegefootball.com. Ryan, we appreciate you so much stopping by, breaking down the Trojans for us.
My pleasure, Mark. Yeah, looking forward. Spring football's fun, but when we get this season again, hopefully it's a normal season. I'm excited. We sort of got like a taste of it last year, but now I think we want to get the full main course of a real football season 2021. Looking forward to that.